In the episodes about Australia, Africa, and both Americas, we touched the subject of the Earth lifelines or ley lines and the ruins around them. We have a clearly visible system of uniform design all over the planet that consists of lines, water dams, impressive water canals, water holes, what appears to be building foundations or remains of some sort of buildings, and agricultural fields with irrigational systems. I call this all collectively with the name ruins of old Earth. It seems to gracefully continue underwater as well. It has been designed to sustain at least many millions of people. Ideally, before watching this episode of the Survivor series, one would watch all the documentaries of Gary Schoening. Although they are quite lengthy, they're well worth watching, so that one starts apprehending the enormous number of these ruins and their identical designs across continents. They are same everywhere. Before looking at the old Earth ruins from a planetary perspective, let's see what an ordinary small person found locally. Alexei Artemiev heard somebody talking about ancient mysteries and some strange straight lines, grid of lines all over the forest of Siberia, and he thought to himself, well, this is very odd because I spend a lot of time in the forest and I've never seen any of these straight lines. Oh, well, yes, they are lines, but everybody knows that those are made by the forestry department to mark the various plots, areas of forest and to keep track of them. But then he thought, there is no harm double checking anything. Let's see what I can find about these forestry department lines in the official documentation of the state. There is no secrecy around the manuals and the archives of the forestry department and their maintenance of the forests, so he could get access to all the needed documents. From the very beginning, it became clear that there is something extremely wrong with all this story about the so-called forest department lines. So this grid of lines in the forest was supposedly built all in Soviet Union times, and indeed in the manuals of those times there were instructions to build a grid, and the size of the cells would be 1 by 2 kilometers. But on the ground, a very small portion of the grid in the country is of this size. Mostly the grid consists of cells with the length of 1067 meters. Now that happens to be an old measurement, antique one, obsolete nowadays, but used in the bygone times in Russia, something like a mile. Maybe in English it is also called a verst. So, judging from the unit of measurement that was used, it seems that this grid is much older, and another paragraph of the manual of the Forest Department would apply to it. Namely, the paragraph which says, while building this forest mesh, grid in Soviet times, to incorporate the already existing grids in it. By the way, the images that you see in this video are from all over the world, the ruins of old Earth from the documentaries of Gary Shining. They're not all from Russia. So this unit of measurement, the old Russian mile, so to say, was not in use during Soviet times. So this by itself strongly suggests that this is an older grid. And on the other hand, old, but not that old, because at least we still know about the unit of measurement that was being used during its construction, so maybe it is not extremely old in this case. And this is just the beginning. The total length approximately of this forest line is some 3 million kilometers. Well, to make that is not as easy as it is to talk about it. Although we do have huge sophisticated machinery nowadays to do it mechanically, this is relatively recent, and also if we calculate, we find out that we would need approximately 20,000 of these monsters working for 80 years to create this grid. Well, the forest department in Russia never possessed such a fleet of monsters ever throughout its full existence. It was always in the state of insufficient funding and a lack of resources. So in other words, this grid could not have been built in Soviet time. But then how and when was it made? Did the villagers made it with axes manually? Even if we make a fantasy hypothesis that they organized and obliged people to do it for free, which never happened, because if it would have happened, there would have been some mention and memory of it. Still, such a large part of the population would have been needed that this would be a titanic task that would have not have remained unnoticed, if at all possible. Actually, in regions, because Siberia is very, very large and very scarcely populated and very, very cold, I mean, there was no, mostly there is no local population that you could mobilize even for free to fulfill such a project manually. I mean, these are 4 meters wide paths, and chopping off, bringing down a tree manually is not so easy actually. So if we want to face the naked truth, that is that we are buried in such an ignorance that we don't know even the history that could have happened a few hundred years ago, and we have no clue how could somebody have been made these lines in the recent past when still units of measurement were used that we know about. Isn't it remarkable how ignorant are we? Well, for now, the only thing we know relatively for sure is that this grid was made before year 1918, because at this point the metric system was introduced as compulsory in Russia, so nobody would be allowed to use any other units of measurement in a state project. The grid is oriented exactly as the pointer of the compass. It points towards the magnetic pole of the Earth, and moreover the current one. So another clue to tell us that maybe it is not extremely ancient, this grid. And the most amazing thing is that this grid exists even nowadays. People see it very well when they travel by air. It's visible in Google Earth. And it is amazing because although in Soviet times there was some sort of underfunded forestry department, but at least it was well organized and it was functioning as much as it could, while nowadays the condition is quite deplorable. Funds are even more scarce. Making improvements to the grid is out of question, but what about maintenance? Well, there are instructions for maintenance. The workers are supposed to check how are the lines doing every 20 years, and they do it if they can. I mean, if they find resources and people to do it. And yet, amazingly enough, no trees are still growing on these lines. Yes, weeds are growing, the normal weeds that are found in the forest as well, but no trees whatsoever. This is quite remarkable actually. You can compare it with the situation near the electric posts. Those are cleaned regularly in all countries. Otherwise, the situation would be quite precarious with the electric wiring. And also the areas around satellite cells and etc. is regularly maintained for sure by a team of workers, and still all the time small trees grow from the seeds from the forest around, but they don't grow on these lines at all, although they're so old. Well, I'm not surprised. Apparently some technique or technology that we have no clue about has been used to make these lines. And indeed, the next big topic in the Survivor series would be the fact that not only the knowledge about our true history is gradually disappearing in very recent times, but also um, technological knowledge. I gave only one brief hint in the episodes before with the medieval rockets, and all this may sound like a strange idea initially to many of you because we are used to the daily bombarding with propaganda that we are in some times of technological advancement and we are rapidly improving and all this type of lies. No, this is not the fact. We are improving only in certain areas and rapidly forgetting more important ones. I think the next episode will be on the St. Peter's megaliths, and over there we'll see plenty of proof that not in some 20,000 or 12,000 years ago they were unknown to us technology, but just a few hundred years ago, and the proofs are right in front of us. Let's get back to the forest grid. We have no idea when it was made exactly or how. And for unknown reason, trees simply refuse to grow there. Although currently in Russia they not don't even have resources to organize somebody visiting these lines every 20 years. What to speak of removing, for example, the fallen trees. And in this situation, it's obviously ridiculous to think that somebody is going there and regularly maintaining and uprooting small shoots of trees or anything like that. And so it turns out that the lines of the Soviet Forest Department has nothing to do with any forest department actually at all, because they continue even in the areas where there is no forest. They seem to continue even underwater. This raises really many more questions. For how long? Is this another grid now from another civilization? Was this type of grid used by numerous civilizations, or were these areas swallowed by the oceans in recent time? Or and it's not just the lines, the full set of old earth ruins is also present underwater. Now this is what Bing maps show near Scandinavia, while Google Maps shows completely different picture. This is from Antarctica. They're showing us really not much here. And again, those dots near the island of Sakhalin, well, there are rumors that these were actually pyramids and they continued on the shore as well and were demolished by the military in the not so far away past. Interesting also, what could have left these marks on the bottom of the oceans? This is what leaves such marks nowadays. But God knows, so what was leaving such marks in the past? Maybe some of these animals. And these items are from various museums of Latin and South America. But are there any somewhat preserved old earth ruins that could give us a clue of who built the full system of lines, water dams, and so on? Well, it turns out there is. The vast megalithic network of stone buildings and canals definitely fits in the overall style of the old ruins lines and the overall level of technology required. So we do have a very good chance that the complexes of Angkor Wat is the most famous, but actually there are many of them, were not built on the lines, but are a part of the original full set of old world ruins. There is a large number of artificially created water bodies in the Khmer Kingdom, and their layout on the ground is with remarkable precision and visual style very similar to that of all old ruins. So there yet another reason to suggest that the full system of old ruins is not extremely old, but some of it could be even hundreds of years old, because on the original buildings in the complexes of Angkor Wat we still see wooden elements that haven't rotten, and rotting occurs very quickly in areas with high humidity like that of Cambodia. So in other words, we do have some ground to suggest that the older ruins are left by the civilization that we call survivors. Now again, in the same region of the world, we see a vast network of canals. It is the size of a full country. It is that huge, and even the surrounding regions, and it is carried out with remarkable precision. The official version that the simple Vietnamese peasants engineered this full system and carried it out with the most simple, unsophisticated household tools cannot withstand any criticism at all. It's rather ridiculous. To make such a large and sophisticated system of wide and very deep canals, you need central planning and proper tools with which you can lay out your project on the ground. It won't happen with these tools. And then you need proper tools to carry out the digging itself. That is one titanic earthwork of proportions that we can hardly imagine, and it is not by spare Vietnamese fairy creatures that fly idle in the air and have no work. The Vietnamese are busy tilling their land and making indeed small channels and maintaining them to connect their own fields to this system, irrigation system, and transportation system that they have inherited. I don't deny they do the small irregular channels that are immediate to their fields. The old earth ruins include many thousands of water dams, all of an uniform design and shape, and scattered on all continents. Another thing that they have in common is that they were on rivers that no longer exist. And yet they are so well preserved. Not much signs of erosion. After all, these are earthworks. So if they were really, really ancient, they would be in very poor shape. But they're not. Or at least too many of them are well preserved. I see this as a very strong evidence pointing to the fact that in the not so far away past, the face of our planet was quite different, much more favorable and pleasant for human habitation, with rivers and lush vegetation all over, and the deserts appeared relatively recently, or at least many of them. This seriously questions full branches of so-called sciences. But should we rather believe our eyes or certain hypotheses, no matter by how many penguins are they endorsed? If you have some more sensible explanation for the thousands of water dams found all over the deserts of our planet, or indeed any explanation of all, please do contact me. I would like if to know if I'm missing out something important. The old earth ruins include what looks to our standards something like airports. Indeed, we do use some of them till date as airports. The best example being the airport in Gambia. Asphalted roads were a rare sight in the country when they finally made the repair of this old stripe, whatever it is. They had something like 5 traffic lights at the time they built it. They are that advanced over there, but they have an airport. Actually, the older base is so long that they only repaired part of it, and still it is so big that it can accept our most advanced shuttles nowadays. It is one of the uh, best airports for this in the entire world. Actually, the earliest publicly available records of this airport date from the early days of aviation, when the British were repairing something over there. And there is mentioned that the airport is in very bad condition and needs repair. Unfortunately, that record doesn't contain any information as of the original builders, but if it was this stripe was airport at that times as well, well, they must have had something much bigger than ours, because we still don't have space shuttles that would need the full strip. That's why only part of it was repaired. There are more clues about from whom we might have inherited the ruins of the old earth. If you remember, in one of my previous videos, Nikolai Subotin told us that he found old earth type ruins at the locations where the archaeologists of the last few centuries in Russia um, believed and did some excavations on the sites where certain tribes live, tribes that are now categorized as fairy tales and magical beings that never existed. Well, I found few very interesting details. I heard them from Radik Garipov. He is a director of the Geological Club in Perm, that's in Siberia, where some of those amazing megaliths were found. And he was, by the way, the local guide for some of the expeditions who made the actual amazing discoveries of those megaliths. So he shares very interesting details about the local, maybe we can call them tribal or indigenous inhabitants of the areas, which are very few but are there. First of all, during Soviet Union time, in the not so far away past, couple of villages were discovered that lived in complete isolation from our world. They knew the language, they knew about us, but they lived in a completely self-sufficient ways. They had no passports or any other sign that they're a citizen of anything, and for some strange reason, they felt no need to maintain connections with the villages that are, well, few kilometers away in some cases, or even let's say even few hundred kilometers away. That is rather unnatural behavior. And so Garipov continues that this type of people, or maybe at least some of their shamans, seem to know much more than we do. For example, in very rare occasion, hunters or curious people like ourselves do venture in those areas by foot. It is extremely rare because it's cold, inhospitable, and there is no infrastructure at all. But once such a curious hunter or traveler was warned by these local people not to go in a certain area on a certain day. They just told him, don't go there at this time, go at some other time. He did not listen and he went. Nothing was happening in the beginning, but then all of a sudden a terrific sound started coming from the ground, and the ground started pulsating. It was not an earthquake tremor, it was really a pulse, a very strong one. The scared man ran back for his life, but in other instances people did not listen to the locals and paid with their lives, like a famous group of young enthusiastic researchers who were also warned, do not go there. And yet they went exactly at the time and place where they were told not to go. And after that, they were found dead, and they died in a very tragic and dramatic way. First of all, it was covered all with snow, so steps were clearly visible. There were no steps besides those that belonged to the members of this team. So whatever or whoever scared them to death must have been something that we know little about. This much can be gathered about the case from what was found as an aftermath. Apparently, the young people cut off the sides of their tent and run in horror because something was coming from the door, or that's how the situation looks after the investigation. They did not go out through the door, they made a hole in the tent and they run out through it in great hurry. They were all blinded and eventually died, desperately trying to climb the trees and hurting their hands badly on the sharp branches of the conifers. And also, there is reason to consider that they have seen something unusual even before this happened to them all of a sudden, because they have just made their tent for the night and somebody had cooked whatever dinner or soup or something was staying there cooked, but nobody was eating it. When this happened, they were in the process of writing articles that had the headings of Bigfoot exists and something of this sort. They just started writing their article when this happened to them. After introducing the topic of the Earth lifelines that I'm now putting into the category Old Earth ruins, I did receive a good number of responses from various YouTube users who were trying to put various hypotheses as of how the lines came to existence. My impression is that most, not all of them, were people who are sincerely curious, but are having a psychological difficulty accepting that for so many years they have lived in a complete ignorance of what is their real origin. For example, the best out of all ideas that I received by email is that the lifelines are left by land exploration heavy machinery that basically scans the earth and searches for various ores. Well, it's possible that this type of machinery does leave some lines, as do so many things on Earth. I'm not saying all lines on Earth are belong to the old Earth ruins, but it's quite unlogical to suggest that they are the reason for the lifelines because there are many thousands of very thick lifelines, and you would need machinery of the size of 100 elephants put together on a pile moving around. We don't have such machineries. In addition, the track of any machinery that we have nowadays would quickly disappear with time. While the lifelines stay, and they not only stay, but they also influence the vegetation around. Also, ground exploration machinery doesn't make water holes and other large water reservoirs with very regular shape on its stops, and so on and so on. And yet I received these suggestions from otherwise educated people who are definitely capable of logical thinking, yet they would convince themselves and believe something illogical as a psychological reaction. They just, it's too difficult to leave this comfort zone and all of a sudden face the reality that you know very little about where did you come from and in where do you live, because this not only questions the full model of history that they have been believing for so many years, but also questions the full credibility of all sciences, because people tend to believe in scientific things and trust the authority of the same academia that has been presenting to us the so-called official science. And because the old world ruins are such a clear example of how ridiculous the so-called academia can be, then some people feel as if they stand on moving, shifting sands, and to get rid of this feeling and regain their feeling of stability, they would believe in something which is not very logical, but it will keep temporarily alive their beliefs in some sort of history, be it mainstream or even so-called alternative. But there is another much more fun way to deal with this situation, and instead of burying one's head like an ostrich, one can take it in this way. Wow, so it is really so exciting. We can finally find out where did we come from by finding out the true history. It is actually very exciting that we are descendants of angels and magicians. Now on the next video footage we'll see how the old Earth ruins look from an airplane, because yes, online programs like Google Earth and Bing Maps also give us an idea. But let's not forget that they are heavily filtered and are being continuously filtered, and images that are uncomfortable for mainstream history are being all the time removed. The airplane is flying mostly over areas that are uninhabited and according to mainstream history have always been uninhabited because they have been very cold for many thousands of years, they are trying to assure us. And yet a lot of things with a very regular geometric shape are visible on this footage. And now on the subject of how were the lifelines made. In the previous episodes I put forward the hypothesis that they were made from above because they go over cliffs and a few other reasons. But this is just one of the hypotheses. For example, they could have been made also on ground level using some absolutely unknown to us technique. Like, for example, using a beam of energy connecting two points, the beginning and the end. Why not? This could also exist as a hypothesis. For example, the famous trident in Nazca, Peru. If there wasn't any force that would be magical looking to us, then why doesn't the sand cover it? Why it is not devoured by the sands? There are mentions of it in the historic records for hundreds of years, so it has been there at least hundreds of years. Now you see various trident images from Europe and Asia, similar in shape to the trident in Peru. So maybe those same magical to us forces that maintain the shape of the Peruvian trident also maintain the forest lines from getting overgrown by vegetation, and maybe they also change the surrounding vegetation in other instances where the lines pass through other areas, not forest areas. So to summarize, we have a very large number of old earth ruins and lines of identical design scattered on various continents. In addition, we cannot even guess what kind of technique or technology has been used to make some of them. So what does this mean for the mainstream popular history timeline that we hear about in school? It means that the textbooks are good only for fire starters or other similar uses, like for example papercrete. You can make very nice antique looking flower pots from papercrete. That's another very good use of the textbooks. Because in the light of all the ruins and lines that we see, it makes no sense to think that people were primitive and limited to their own area. So how does the mainstream academia, the academic establishment, deal with this very unpleasant fire starter and papercrete situation? Well, it uses various approaches. First of all, pretending that these ruins don't exist and keeping silence about them. Second, destroying them as much as possible, always under some pretext, occasional fire or terrorists destroying old cities, things like that. There is always some excuse seemingly not connected. And yet another approach is fragmenting the history. What I mean is history is always studied in terms of different countries. For example, it is the specialists of Peruvian history that would supposedly ponder and try to solve the mystery of the so-called Nazca lines. And no connection is being made that similar images on the surface of the earth, or in sometimes even identical, are found also in North America and Africa. This is not even mentioned. And so is the case with all the other lines and ruins. They always try to somehow accommodate them in the local history, and nobody seems to notice the fact that they're of identical design all over the world, and that cannot be by chance. And then the academic circles are structured in such a way that the world history is supposed to be a total sum of the histories of various countries. And supposedly those histories of the various countries are written by specialists in that area. And the specialist in African cultures cannot tell the Peruvian specialists what to do with his history. And so the communication is made very difficult or impossible, because everybody is told to look for explanation within the isolated local cultures. And since there are no specialists, and there cannot be any specialists in this one world ancient culture, then it shouldn't exist. That's their logic. The mainstream historic academia has divorced itself from the very principles of what is science, and has turned into something else. That is why it cannot present the history in a correct manner. The researchers in those academic circles are only allowed to research within the given historic model. They are not allowed to get outside of it, and their results will be usually wrong because the model itself is wrong. And yet another approach that the official establishment uses to deal with the fire starter papercrete problem is to deny access of the general population to correct maps of our planet. There is abundant information on YouTube about cases in which people have very good reasons to believe that the most interesting part of the maps never reach us. They are simply removed before the maps even get to popular services like Google Maps and Bing Maps. And whatever interesting escapes the attention of the editors and reaches the public is very soon smudged or made invisible or somehow deleted during so-called improvements of the services. Again, on YouTube there are many examples of this, with proofs how it was and how after that they edited the image in a way that we cannot see the old earth ruins. They're using the fact that people are convinced that the images that they see are maps because they fit in the actual surrounding in the city around them, so they think that all the maps are indeed reality, but many of them are only computer simulations of what they want us to believe our planet looks like. Now let's see an example from Holland involving something like what officially is called Star Fort, although I don't see that it has anything to do with a fort. It's just an earthwork. First it looks like this. Clean field, but some smudging is there where the actual Star Fort is, or I don't know even if it is, or there is nothing at all. Maybe the residents of this village will tell me. And then on the next image, after supposedly taken after 1 or 2 years, a star fort appears. Well, if there was some sort of, let's say, historical research or digging out, there would have been science. It would be on a different level now. And how can you unearth it if it is itself an Earth form? I really doubt that they have been doing some digging over there. And the initial images themselves look as if they have been blurred using some sort of smudging online tool, very poorly done job. Maybe their project is underfunded, so they cannot hire quality you know designers to do it. And another example again from that region of Belgium and Holland. First of all, something smudged, and then all of a sudden, this old earth ruin style appears. Again, without any sign of archaeological style work being done around it. And another example again from the same area, Ardenburg. First of all, something smudged. Then, second of all, something very artificial looking. I don't believe this is a satellite image. And then yet another one. I don't know, is this finally the real one, or they have hired a better designer this time? And yet another example again from the same region. I don't even understand what they are aiming at exactly with this project of theirs, but the disturbing is that people think that these are satellite images, while these are actually illustrations done by designers. Yet another example how the maps are putting us in some sort of virtual reality instead of showing us the truth. Now, in this case, they didn't like one of the rays of the star fort that probably got deformed over the years by the peasants who are tilling the land, and they repaired it in this way. Why? Very strange. But the funny thing is that their repairs are of an amazingly low quality. Our forefathers were building star forts with amazing accuracy, and these are like large buildings, and we cannot make correct rays. I mean symmetrical with the other rays of this star fort as a computer image even. I think it's a time to realize how pathetic are we and then start learning about the real world and the real history. The old earth ruins reveal residences for at least many millions of people who lived there. That's really a lot of people. And what happened to them? How did they disappear? For example, in Siberia, the footage that we see now is from the very cold Siberia, and apparently it was densely inhabited at some point, judging from the ruins that we see. So what, millions can disappear just like that, with no trace? Yes, they can, and in 2 or 3 episodes we'll see what probably happened to all these people. And who were they? They were our real forefathers who inhabited the earth in the company of other races and species that now we call magical fairies, elves, and so on. All we get now is maybe some distant reflection of the beauty of that earth, of that civilization, in some traditional costumes, for example. Geometric figures and lines on the ground are part of the old Earth ruins, both on this aerial footage and on the images from Google Maps. Although these Siberian regions that you see now are very scarcely inhabited, still there are some modern structures on them, and here is how to distinguish between the two. This is a modern road, a highway. It's not straight, it follows the curves of the landscape. And the quality stuff, the irregular lines that do not follow the landscape, are the old ones.
The truth will appear so simple and clear. There's a feeling inside, so deep and so wide, so open and free. When love is revealed, all beings are healed, so naturally. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear. Let your light show the way, forever to stay in this circle of friends. Let your heart be a guide to lead you inside where love never ends. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear. And when love overflows, you can only let go and be swept out